So, hello everyone, and welcome to the March 2021 edition of the EPA's Insights interview. And I'm joined today by someone whose career spans the globe, from his time as a student at Stanford and earning an MBA at Wharton School in the US, to working for firms in India and the Philippines, to periods in Los Angeles and Abu Dhabi, and until recently as the CEO of Finabler in Dubai. He's recently joined as the CEO of a bank that's helping companies across the globe address their payments challenges today, building on a heritage that goes back more than 100 years. So please welcome, to share a little bit about himself and his thoughts on the world of payments, the Chief Executive of Crown Agents Bank, Bhairav Trivedi.
Thank you, Tony. I'm delighted to be here.
It's good to have you here. So let me start right away by asking you a little bit about Crown Agents Bank, because some of the viewers may not know of you and your business. So what are the problems that the bank sets out to solve, and what does it help to do to solve them?
Absolutely. So I think that's a great question and a great introduction into the organization as we are today. So if you think about Crown Agents Bank, we are a core financial service partner for several organizations across the world. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we facilitate the movement of money globally. And when you think about that, it's these days it's core, right? I mean, much like what's happened across organizations such as the cell phone, where in the good old days when we traveled, we said, how do we make sure that we connect to the right partner interface, to now where we just get down and walk away and continue working like nothing has changed. That's really where Crown Agents Bank comes in. Today, we provide our services to governments, development organizations, and regulated financial services businesses globally. What we do is we provide core facilities that encourage financial inclusion, and at the same time, take out a lot of the friction that's there in these financial service markets. So effectively, if you think about what we do, we are able to take money that is in a certain geography, move it across borders, effect a foreign exchange, and deliver it to the end mile, the last point, at a different country, different geography, to the individual that is concerned in their local currencies. We work with, as I mentioned earlier, governments. So this could be organizations such as the US State Department, DFID, or FCDO, as it's now called, in moving money globally to the various stakeholders that they want to make payments to, or to various organizations that they want to make charitable donations to. We provide this to various UN organizations, international development organizations, and other charitable organizations globally. And finally, of course, we also provide this to bank services businesses and non-bank financial institutions that are involved in the movement of money. So someone sitting in, say, in the US, sending money back to his family in Uganda, he initiates a transaction. The organization that does the initiation of the transaction then gets in touch with us. We facilitate the movement of that money, convert it into the regular local currency, and then pass it on directly to the end-use customer. That's where we come in. And what we've done over time is, as an organization, taken this to the next level and added a digital element so that we remove friction from this, optimize how it works, improves the customer interface on the transaction, and finally are able to do this in a completely seamless manner.
Very good, very good. But what's fascinating about this, and I know that's a great intro to the firm. Thank you. Let's have an intro to you, because you've just moved on from rescuing a troubled firm in the Middle East, known to be troubled, and put it into good shape, into leading this bank with clearly big ambitions. I know our members will be keen to get to know a little bit about you and what's really important to you. So, what is it really makes you tick? What is it that really makes you so driven?
So that's a very interesting question, and that allows me to talk about a little bit about myself at a personal level. I think I think in any of these businesses, it's the ability to make a difference that really drives people. And I think that's a core driver for why I do what I do, because I know whatever we do in the end actually makes a difference, not just at a corporate level, but down to the individual level, right? And that's really what is a core driver. If I look at, I've been driven right from a very early age. I grew up in a family of folks that were extremely driven and yet did it with a social element. Both my parents were doctors. They served the community, but they did it where regardless of who came to them, they never turned them away. I grew up as the youngest child of a family of four, and so I had siblings that actually managed to do a lot of things and make sure that I continued to carry on that tradition. I had a very early exposure to the Indian Navy. I served in the Indian Navy many, many years ago, and I think what the armed services do for you is actually they create a tremendous sense of leadership. They instill a sense of tenacity and resilience in you, and they do that all with a firm grip on discipline and integrity. And I think those are key elements that make sure that you drive. Finally, when I look at financial services and the business we are in, I think some of the core drivers are going to be disruption, the ability to do something differently, do it more efficiently, and do it in a better manner. Excuse me. So if you go back a few years, who would have ever thought that we would be able to sit at home and hail a cab, have it come to our door, and just walk out of the door, get in, get to our destination, and walk away, right?
Yes.
And that's what disruption does. It changes the way we do things. Sometimes it's not easy, but in the long run, it makes a huge difference. And I think that's definitely there for me. And then always in the end, there's an element of having fun, right? So I think you can do all the hard work you like. You can be as driven as you like, but you have to wake up every morning knowing that you're dying to get into work. Some days are horrible and you want to get out of work and never come back, right? But yet next morning you wake up and you're raring to get to work. And I think that's what makes the big difference in being driven.
Yeah, I love that. And there's this fun element is something that I know we've all missed a little bit in the last year or so. It's all been pretty productive and efficient, but this idea of us now finally, as we approach the spring, having the country reopening again is something we're all really looking forward to, I can assure you. It's fascinating to hear of your military background as well, because the previous chair of the Emerging Payments Association's advisory board, Andrea Dunlop, had 8 or 9 years in the military. And she quite often says that whole experience helped her with a sense of structure and accountability and organization and discipline that you've just referred to as well, which is fascinating. And I think, okay, so let's move on to talk a little bit about the sector that you're in, though, because if we're looking at disruption, there's no part of the payments industry that needs more disruption or needs disruption more than perhaps the world of cross-border and international remittance and FX. As a philosophy, the EPA is setting out to reduce cost, reduce fraud, and reduce friction, particularly in terms of cross-border and in terms of access and speed as well. But as G20 confirmed last summer, we're far away from achieving this sort of utopia of a low-friction, low-cost, real-time payments system internationally. Can you explain why there's so much friction in that part of the payments industry and what you think we can do to address these problems?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And that's actually the root of a lot of the issues that we have globally in regard to financial inclusion, right? I think it's all about the friction that comes into this. And broadly, if I think about friction, there are 3 primary areas that it works from. I think the first one is infrastructure, right? We sit in established geographies in the developed world where we have tremendous levels of infrastructure. Yet you go to some of the geographies we operate in and there's a severe lack of infrastructure. And so how do we build that or leverage the existing infrastructure to manage those processes? Number one. The second one is access. We come from a world where everyone has access to a bank account. It may take you a little while to get it set up, but once it's set up, it works seamlessly. We are looking at geographies where most people do not even know what a bank is or what a bank account is, right? And so how do you manage some of that friction? And then the third piece is, of course, multiple stakeholders, right? If you've got many stakeholders in the process, there is going to be friction, right? So how do we look at managing some of these things? I mean, you think about access, I think a lot of the developing world has said, okay, can we jumpstart this and move forward? So we operate a lot in Africa, and I think you'll find in Africa, they manage the financial inclusion aspect by really looking at what do people carry with them all the time. And it's this good old thing, the mobile phone, right? So how do we get people to be able to do financial inclusion using the mobile phone? And you've got mobile money accounts that make sure everyone's involved, everyone's part of this, and that's really what takes it forward. So reducing friction for us is all about managing infrastructure, giving access to people, and managing financial inclusion. And then finally making sure that if you've got multiple stakeholders, does that reduce the efficiency and increase the cost? And if so, then how do you manage to go straight through from the point of doing an FX transaction to actually being able to go to the last mile directly, so that you remove the middlemen and take away any of those costs associated with that?
Because there's lots of people in the value chain here. I mean, the correspondent net banking network can be multiple layers. And I think this is all the challenge we also have, don't we? Is that I think there tends to be either a lack of understanding or a lack of appreciation of this complexity by people who at a high level in places like FATF in the US are making it very challenging for these correspondent banks to work effectively. And know your customer concerns and things like this. They're trying to avoid money laundering and fraud, which is very good. The objective is good. The difficulty, I think, is that if you're not careful, the overlay of these regulations will prevent these correspondent banking networks from existing, which will mean that people won't have access to the banking capabilities that you're able to provide them with.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, Tony. I think, regulation, I think, is key in this business, because what happens is when you are able to move funds, how do you ensure that they're moving for the right purpose and to the right kind of people? So from that aspect, definitely regulation is a key aspect. I think we need to toe the line between regulation and over-regulation, as you mentioned, right? To the point where it starts to intrude on financial inclusion. So that's definitely, I think, a key aspect of this. The ability to remove the middleman, specifically when you look at transactions within the some of the frontier markets we operate in. So today, you could have someone sending money from the UK all the way to Ghana, and the cost of that transaction could be anywhere to 10 to 15%. I mean, you think about it, what that means is the person that's receiving the money is losing that much of that money. And it's hard-earned money that people could do with. So why wouldn't we make the system more efficient to be able to provide? So if you send £20 to someone, they actually get £20, not that they get 15, right? And that's, I think, the key driver.
Yeah, and that will make a huge difference. I mean, I think about the movement of money internationally. If we could take just a few percent, I look at the way in which the old letters of credit and that whole bills of lading system around international trade works. And it can be 3 to 5%. And if we just imagine if we could take 3 to 5% less cost. Now, somebody might say to us, well, that means to say that 3 to 5% are currently being paid to people in the payments industry. And I would say, well, actually, we should do without those 3 to 5%, because ultimately the whole world will benefit, and a rising tide lifts all ships. And they should be making money in places which are efficient and effective.
That's so true. I mean, if you look at what happens today in the world, we move trillions of dollars on a daily basis, right? And so if I was talking about my first instance where I talked about an individual transaction, you could argue, well, it was £20 and they lost 10%. That was £2. It wasn't so significant. When we start to talk about trillions of pounds that are moving globally, suddenly the dynamic changes, right? 10% out there could be a significant difference, and could change economies of countries globally. So I think that's the key driver.
Well, that's exciting that you're being able to affect that situation.
Absolutely, and that's been a core driver of this organization. And given the geographies we operate in, we think it also adds a social element, right? I mean, the ability is some of those funds go right back into development efforts within those countries, within those geographies. It could be a core lifeline for someone to survive, right?
Yes, or education, which in itself creates enterprise, which creates work and engagement and output, which creates well-being for other people in the country. And yeah, no, I'm with you entirely.
Exactly. And, you think about some of the organizations that we work with would include, the High Commission of Refugees, etc. I mean, we're talking about people that barely have enough to live or survive. And if, you sent them $10, but they only ended up getting 5, that would be, that would be really sad. And we want to make sure whatever you send them actually gets to that end user. And that's where we feel we play a core critical part in the entire social element of this.
Brilliant. So what's your vision for the way in which the payments industry can start to adapt to payments industry can work together and collaborate to address some of the root causes of some of these problems? Do you have a sense of how that might work?
So I think it's all about collaboration, right? I think today we all compete in different parts of the pie, and each one of us feels entitled to maximize what we make in the small little piece we compete in. But I think if everyone comes, to the table and says, here's what I want to do, and I think the UN has actually set some very good sustainable development goals of saying, how do we reduce the cost of transactions globally so that, and bring them down from some crazy amounts in a lot of these emerging geographies and frontier markets to something that's more reasonable, that would work a lot better. So I think to that end, as the payments industry, I really think that we need to start collaborating a lot more and driving down the costs for these transactions in these respective geographies.
And that's entirely why you, as a patron of the EPA, will play such a valuable role in our community, and why you'll fit in so well. So it's fantastic. So we have a very exciting industry. I believe there's no part of financial services which is more exciting, more progressive, and more fast-moving than payments. If you were to be giving advice to your children or your friends about coming into the industry, what would you say to them? And what would be your advice?
So I think it's an exciting industry, right? I think it's an industry that allows people to make a difference. And as I look at the younger generation, from the times we had it, where we had to actually search for information, sift through, huge manuals and documents before we even found a nugget of information that was valuable, to the internet age where people have access to this information. They're more driven by social causes. They're more driven about doing good in the geographies across the world, right? People truly look at this now, and especially the younger generation, as making a difference in our world. It's no longer making a difference in my community. It's making a difference in my world. Right. And I think that would be wonderful. I think in the financial services, and specifically in the payments industry, we are able to facilitate a lot of that, much like infrastructure, elements. And I think that's going to make the big difference. So I think this is an exciting industry. We are on the edge of disruptive technology. Where do we go next? Is it wearables? Is it biometric? Is it, someone doing an eye scan and saying, yes, this is Tony, and no, this is not Tony, and I can now make a payment to them, and doing it in a frictionless environment where everyone feels included is going to be a core driver. So I definitely say this is an exciting industry. It's great. It's wonderful to be in. And I hope that many more people start to participate and make a difference in these geographies.
That's certainly an uplifting vision, and a terrific way to close this very short introduction to you, to the community. I'm delighted to have had a chance to get to know you a little bit here. And please, ladies and gentlemen, Bhairav Trivedi, CEO of Crown Agents Bank, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Tony. I look forward to working closely with the EPA and definitely with all of my colleagues in the payments industry.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tony. Bye-bye.